All right, everybody, welcome to Tesla Today. Very important and very fun topic today. As we know, what happened last Friday shocked the world, or at least us Tesla investors. We saw Elon drive a Model S car all around Palo Alto with code that was written at least 99% by AI coded software. And so today we're going to look at the history of the thinking of how did we get here. We're going to show some videos of George Hotz, who was the founder and CEO of Comma.ai, predicting that Tesla was going to head in this direction. We're going to dive deeper into what version 12 is and some of the nuances. So today we have Hans Nelson with us. Hans is a regular in the Tesla Twitter community. He's an engineer and general nerd, just like many of us, not me, but Hans is. And he's going to share with us some of these videos, and he's been following very closely over the years. Thanks, Hans.
Awesome. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so let's start by setting the stage here. We've got Elon Musk doing his live stream. It was a Model S using hardware 3, but it was on version 12. And as many people here already know, version 12 is very different from all the other versions of full self-driving because this one was built by AI. It was 100% AI coded. They did not need to kind of give it any code written to identify a roundabout or to identify signs, or to give space for bicyclists. It figured it out on its own by just giving it videos over time. This is what Ashok Alaswamy said. This end-to-end neural network will result in the safest, the most competent, the most comfortable, the most efficient, and the best self-driving system ever produced. It's going to be very hard to beat with anything else. And it took a tremendous amount of high-quality data from the fleet, a very large amount of compute, and a world-class engineering team to get to this point. Elon replied to him saying it was super hard to do this. Even when FSD is 2 times as safe as the average human driver, fully unsupervised in all scenarios, then we're going to make it 3 times, 4 times, 10 times safer than a human. So, that's really what happened. What do you think, Hans? Tell me what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, I think it's important there, that last part that Elon talked about, that they're just going to keep improving the system, that ultimately the goal of FSD is, one, convenience, but really more critically, it's about safety. And so what Elon is trying to accomplish with FSD is make the road safer and reduce the total number of deaths that we see in automobile accidents across the entire world every year. And so right now, humans, we're pretty good at driving as long as we're not intoxicated and we're paying attention. But unfortunately, accidents happen. A lot of people are driving intoxicated or distracted on their cell phones. And so a lot of people get injured, and then also a number of people die every year. And so if FSD only operated at the same level of safety that humans do, we would still have that enormously high death toll. And so it's incredibly important for them to just keep pushing the boundaries there on that level of safety. 10 times safer than a human and beyond would be incredible win for all of humanity. On both the level of productivity, for people not to have to spend their time driving, that's a huge win in and of itself. But then to get that productivity win and also the safety win at the same time, I mean, that's exactly why Tesla is doing what they are doing, why it's such an important project for them to be working on. And why they have spent so much time and energy and effort pursuing this mission for so long.
Yeah. Okay, so the next part, we're going to show 4 clips of George Hotz talking to Lex Fridman. One was 4 years ago, and then the others are 2 years ago. And George Hotz is the CEO, founder of Comma.ai, which is a competitor to Tesla's full self-driving. They are also creating, since 2015, self-driving software that they are open sourcing, and they're selling and partnering with other auto manufacturers. And I think they have 200 different cars out there that they can be able to use it on. But 4 years ago, George, you'll hear, has already predicted that Tesla will get here. But he also talked about the end-to-end system. This is 4 years ago. So the end-to-end system is this ability where just one giant neural net, feed it video in, and then output out. It knows how to press the brakes, accelerate, and make decisions, versus what Tesla has been doing for the last 4 years, which is neural networks for every single kind of edge case, right? So here's a neural net for identifying stop signs. Here's a neural net to deal with roundabouts. And only once they figured that one out, then they added it to the system, and now it can do roundabouts. And then they realized that they didn't need to do that. We can do just this end to end. But you're pointing out that actually Tesla knew this many years ago, but they needed to go through this iteration to software 2.0 and then the end to end. You couldn't just do one or the other, correct? So tell me when you want me to play the videos, and do you have a comment before I play the videos?
Yeah, so when George is going to mention at a couple points throughout here that Tesla's using segnets, and when he says segnets, what he's talking about are segmented neural networks. And so that's where you were just talking about there are, small pieces of software 2.0, neural net code that are responsible for a specific task. And then they're training each of those things individually, evaluating their performance individually, and then trying to patchwork them together in kind of like a Lego block style overall system that completes everything that they need to do. And they have moved away from that now in V12, where, they're just training basically one shot all the way from video in to control output. And they don't have these, segmented sections of the code anymore. And so that's one of the things that, as he's talking, just know the difference between end to end and a segnet, that segnets are what really the Tesla Autopilot team started out doing, and they have been migrating to this software 2.0, as Andre calls it, but end to end version that that George was talking about here. And it's just been, a matter of doing the work. It's an engineering problem that takes a lot of time and effort and compute. And so, let's go ahead and watch those clips.
Okay. So this particular one is a Lex Fridman interview with George Hotz 4 years ago. Let's hear what he said.
So you're focused on level 2 currently.
We're going to be 1 to 2 years behind Tesla getting to level 5.
Okay.
Hey, we're Android, right? We're Android.
You're Android.
Hey, no, I'm just saying, once Tesla gets it, we're 1 to 2 years behind.
Okay.
I'm not making any timeline on when Tesla's going to get it.
That's right. You did. That's brilliant.
I'm sorry, Tesla investors, if you think you're going to have an autonomous robo-taxi fleet by the end of the year.
Yes.
I'll bet against that.
So what do you think
That's
about
good right
this?
there.
The most level 4 companies are kind of just doing their usual safety driver, doing full autonomy kind of testing. And then Tesla does basically trying to go from lane keeping to full autonomy. What do you think about that approach? How successful would it be?
It's a ton better approach, because Tesla is gathering data on a scale that none of them are. They're putting real users behind the wheel of the cars. It's, I think, the only strategy that works. The incremental.
Well, so there's a few components to Tesla approach that's more than just the incrementalist. What you spoke with is the software. So over the air software updates.
Necessity.
Right.
I mean, Waymo Cruise have those too. Those aren't.
But
those differentiate them from the automakers.
Right. No lane keeping assist systems no cars with lane keeping system have that except Tesla.
Yeah.
And the other one is the data, the other direction, which is the ability to query the data. I don't think they're actually collecting as much data as people think, but the ability to turn on collection and turn it off. So I'm both in the robotics world and the psychology, human factors world. Many people believe that level 2 autonomy is problematic because of the human factor. Like the more.
Okay, I'll pause it there. Sorry, guys. But I played longer than you asked me to. So
that's okay. Yeah, that's good. The fact that George, this was one of the things that I loved about watching those interviews, is that it has helped me to manage my expectations a little bit better. And, he's called so many things so well. And so it's one of the reasons why people really listen to him. But he knew that obviously we were not going to get to robo-taxis by the end of the year in 2019. And, here we are in 2023. We're still not there yet, but it does look like we're getting closer. That's for sure. But he knew at that point in time, the data collection engine was going to be a huge piece, and that, the end-to-end thing would work eventually. But he said that Tesla, he didn't know when they were going to make it, but that they were going to be the first ones. He knew that they were the only ones who had the full set of ingredients necessary to actually solve a robotaxi type future. So when he's talking about level 5 autonomy, that's what he's talking about. When he says level 4, he's referring to Waymo and Cruise and these other ones that use a software 1.0 approach coupled with really ridiculous hardware setup in order to try and make a system that kind of works in an area if all the conditions are perfect. But, realistically are not scalable, and they're not something that you can actually build an autonomous business off of, that the unit economics make any sort of sense.
Earlier, you told me that, repeat again what you were saying about who could actually achieve robotaxi. You thought it was actually Tesla, Comma.ai, maybe
Yeah, so
Auto?
the things that you have to have in order to solve this is you have to go all in on computer vision. And then if you're going to go all in on computer vision, you have to have a data engine. You have to have deep expertise in machine learning, and you have to have compute. And really, Tesla is the only one who has all of those things at scale. So they're the only one that's actually capable of doing this. I'm sorry, lots of other people have lots of opinions. No one else is going to be first to a wide scale robotaxi business. It's just not going to happen. And that's one of the reasons we played this clip, was because George Hotz was predicting this in 2019, that Tesla will be first. He didn't know when. He predicted it would be, mid to potentially even late 2020s when it happens, and that Comma.ai would probably lag them by 1 to 2 years. Right now, we still, in 2023, no one else is pursuing the strategy that Tesla's pursuing in the way that Tesla has pursued that strategy, even though George knows that that's the right set of ingredients that are needed. George doesn't have the money in order to really acquire the compute that's necessary. And sales of the Comma 2 and Comma 3 devices have been reasonable. He's running a good profitable business, but he's still not able to even get the data engine really at the same scale that Tesla is, which makes it difficult. And that's one of the reasons why he knows that he's going to be later. And then Li Auto, we've seen recently, is recognizing that Tesla's architecture is a feasible architecture, and it sounds like they're potentially going to start trying to replicate Tesla's approach. And so they may be another competitor at some point down the road. But this is one of the things where, on one hand, if we look at the way that the LLM space has evolved, everyone has a good LLM, it seems like, at the top level. ChatGPT by OpenAI and Microsoft. Google has their own. They actually really started it. They just didn't release it. And so they were really one of the first ones to the party on that. But then also Facebook. All these platforms, basically had that technology, and it all evolved at roughly the same time. And so it's easy for people to look at that and say, okay, if Tesla is able to actually accomplish FSD, someone else will be able to be right on their heels, and they'll be able to compete away any monopolistic advantage that Tesla has by creating that software. And this is a point that I just don't agree with, because unlike ChatGPT and OpenAI, there are no other companies or entities that are really equipped with all of the necessary ingredients that it will take in order to develop an FSD competitor that is in any way comparable in its functionality, in its generality, and its ability to operate, all across the United States at first, and then eventually across the globe. So it's just tough to see that happening. And so, like I said, if George who I still think is probably in my mind the correct position to be the second player in all of this. If he's still thinking it's going to be 1 to 2 years, and it may be longer because he ended up having to start Tiny Corp because of the compute limitation that they were running up. It's just too hard for them as a small company to acquire the scale of compute necessary to do the training that they want to do. And so he's working on the problem of significantly reducing the cost for Comma.ai to perform training by vertically integrating with a sister company down into the compute infrastructure. If he's successful there, that may allow them to be within that 1 to 2 year time frame. They definitely have the strategy for it. It'll be a matter of resources and execution. But then, I don't see Li Auto being able to be any faster to the punch than a George Hotz would be. And so already, it's not like Tesla's going to stand still in that 1 to 2 year time frame. They're only going to be traveling faster and faster, getting better and better. It's going to make so much sense. It will be one of those things where people are pretty much going to be forced to either license from Tesla or be out in the cold.
Okay. Let's listen more to George Hotz 2 years ago in his interview.
Cute. Why are you building an annotator?
I find their entire pipeline, I find your vision, the vision of end-to-end, very compelling, but I also like the engineering of the data engine that they've created. In terms of supervised learning pipelines, that thing is damn impressive. You're basically, the idea is that you have hundreds of thousands of people that are doing data collection for you by doing their experience. So that's kind of similar to the Comma.ai model. And you're able to mine that data based on the kind of edge cases you need. I think it's harder to do in the end-to-end learning, the mining of the right edge cases. That's where feature engineering is actually really powerful, because us humans are able to do this kind of mining a little better. But yeah, there's obvious, as we know, there's obvious constraints and limitations to that idea.
Karpathy just tweeted, he's like, you get really interesting insights if you sort your validation set by loss and look at the highest loss examples.
Yeah.
You can do. We have a little data engine like thing. We're training a segnet. It's not fancy. It's just okay, train the new segnet, run it on 100,000 images, and now take the 1,000 with highest loss. Select 100 of those by human. Get those ones labeled, retrain, do it again. Right. So it's a much less well-written data engine. You can take these things really far, and it is impressive engineering. And if you truly need supervised data for a problem, things like data engine are the high end of the what is attention? Is a human paying attention? We're going to probably build something that looks like data engine to push our driver monitoring further. But for driving itself, you have it all annotated beautifully by what the human does. So,
explain that to me.
Yeah. So I love Lex's pushback there on why, having the data engine is something that's important in George's pursuit of end-to-end. He's not wanting to actually do any sort of labeling of any data. Just like he was saying there at the very end, that the humans' driving decisions basically are the annotations for, did the neural network do what it needed to do correctly. Andre's pushback on that is, that's great, but there are so many possibilities that the neural net could choose to do that are not going to be what the human chooses to do, that the frequency with which the neural net will choose to do the thing that the human does is going to be so infrequent that the that will feel like noise to the neural net, and it won't be able to figure out what is the policy that approaches human driving. And so you can't actually, like, you could throw even like orders of magnitude more compute at solving full self-driving than Tesla even has right now, and you still couldn't actually get that to converge down to an answer that would approximate human driving. And so that's why Lex is pushing back on him, is because what is needed is something to actually feed the neural net with specific data about how to drive that will help kind of prime the neural net to go in the direction that humans would go, in a much more intuitive way, essentially, to the neural net, so that it can actually create a full end-to-end driving system that does that actually does converge to good performance.
Is this what Andre Karpathy tweeted out? Is this what this is?
Yeah, this is definitely part of it. So yeah, worth expanding on is that an important caveat to keep track of in all of this is what runs in the car versus what runs in the back end. For example, the whole explicit stack might be alive and well, but over time move to the back end, and it's being used to tune the data distribution and modulate the loss function, and in this way get distilled into pure end-to-end test time networks. That's the dream. And so there's a distinction here between what Andre is talking about when he says end-to-end, and he makes that clear by saying an end-to-end test time network. So an end-to-end test time network is actually the software in the car that's running in either the hardware 3 or the hardware 4 computer, that it's taking in data from the car, it's feeding that directly into a neural net, and that neural net is processing it all the way from the input to the control output. And so in that way, it is end-to-end neural nets, or nothing but nets, like Elon said. But that's just within the confines of the car. When George Hotz was saying that the correct solution actually to full self-driving was going to end up being, in the long run, not necessarily in the short term, in the long run, it will be the mu0 approach. That's when he's talking about end-to-end, a lot of times that's what he's talking about, is where you, going back to the way that DeepMind solved Go, they had AlphaGo, and then they had AlphaZero, and then they had mu0. And those are 3 different evolutions of how to build the agent that actually was able to solve these things. So the first one, in AlphaGo, they showed the neural net, this is how humans do things, and the neural net learned how humans played Go, and then they were able to, over time, get that to be better than human. But the training was all based on human data. And so it was human data on how to play, and then the rule set. In AlphaGo, my understanding is that they fed it just the rule set, and they didn't actually show it any examples of humans playing. And so they would set up, hundreds and thousands and probably millions of matches between 2 different instances of AlphaZero. And it would have to figure out how to play the game, how to come up with strategies. And that system actually, it took more training compute for it to actually produce the system, but that system ended up being a superior system to AlphaGo. And so AlphaGo was the one that beat Lee Sedol. AlphaZero was then better even than AlphaGo. And then they went to mu0, which they didn't even tell mu0 the rules of the game. They just made it play. And then it had to figure out the rules of the game, and then it had to figure out how to win the game. And so they would just give it rewards whenever it did the right thing. And that system, from what I understand, even figured out how to beat the AlphaZero system. And so when George is talking about the end-to-end approach, he's talking about training a full self-driving system in the mu0 fashion. the problem is that it's really difficult to have, like, you need to have the systems that can play against it, that allow it to play in an automated way in simulation, in order for that whole thing to work, because it has to be able to go through, it has to have an opponent that it can play against in the training program over and over and over and over again. And then those simulations need to be resource light enough to where you can do them millions and billions of times in order for it to come to a solution. And so even what Tesla is doing right now in getting an end-to-end test time network, that is not the mu0 approach that George Hotz wants to see yet. And I don't think we're going to be there for several more years. And when Elon's talking about getting 10 times safer than a human, it's probably that type of system that will finally result in that. But that will be, several iterations into, we continue to make a system that is better and better and better. And then, that's something that they can, once they have a good working full self-driving system and it's shipped to cars, they can perform those basically simulated tests in shadow mode, or at least this is my speculation. I've never heard anyone talk about this specifically, so this isn't based on anyone else's input, but my guess is they would put they would do random starting weights in a blank slate net that is randomly distributed throughout the fleet, and that those would each be a single instance of a shadow mode network, and that those simulated entities would then, it would be doing that across the entire fleet over a significant period of time, and that would be the net that learns the rules of driving implicitly, that's not given anything to begin with, that it'll end up being a system that performs even better than the systems that we've built up. But you have to build up, you couldn't build the AlphaZero version without first building AlphaGo, and you couldn't build the mu0 version without first building the AlphaZero version. And so we're just kind of getting further and further and further down this roadmap of the way that we can actually, because you can't simulate the real world. And that's one of the things about Go, is you can simulate it fully. It's super easy. You can't simulate what's going to happen in the real world. So you have to have a fleet of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, potentially even a billion cars that can all do this simulated training in shadow mode under the hood in a way where it can test, I would have gotten killed there, because we can't actually allow anyone to be put at harm by this training. So it has to be something that runs in the background and is put up against, okay, what would a human do in this scenario? And that's where they'll learn what they can and they can't do. So to begin with humans, and then it can be run as an adversarial network against a full self-driving system that has 10x, it'll start out 3 times safer than a human, and it'll learn how to be better than the 3 times safer than a human system in shadow mode. And then they'll deploy that one to the cars, and then they'll start over again, and it'll just get better and better and better over time.
Hey there, thank you for joining me. If you can, please consider supporting this channel so I can keep it going. It's a lot of work arranging all these amazing interviews. One of the easiest ways is just to click that join button and become a member of the channel. Thank you very much. Let's get brighter. Right. Okay. So just to summarize what you've been saying, just to make it more clear for folks, is that many people think that, Tesla's been going at it the wrong approach. They should have done version 12 right from the beginning, an end-to-end solution. Well, no, you needed to go through the labeling and the neural net specific segments per each, edge case. You need to go through that in order to get to version 12. And then the end-to-end solution also, I think you are making a point that you still need to do auto labeling. Some people don't think you need that, but you still do. But that's in the back end, not necessarily where the driver is.
And I think that's exactly what Karpathy was saying in that tweet, was that all of that explicit network might still exist, but it's going to exist in the cloud instead of being something that's part of the code that's in the car.
Right. I'm going to be interviewing James Dalma, and he's been preparing. And so a lot of this that you're educating me and then we're hearing. So let's hear some more from George Hotz. Again, this is 2 years ago, and just sort of how he thought of the world and what ended up happening. So let's watch.
Whether there's profit to be made depends entirely on one company having a monopoly. I think that the level 4 autonomous ride-sharing
Hold on. That's not the 157.
Decide that you should run the company for a year. How do you run Tesla differently?
I wouldn't change much.
Do you think they're on the right track?
I wouldn't change. I mean, I'd have some minor changes, but even my debate with Tesla about, end-to-end versus segnets, like, that's just software. Who cares, right? Like, it's not like you're doing something terrible with segnets. You're probably building something that's at least going to help you debug the end-to-end system a lot. Right? It's very easy to transition from what they have to like an end-to-end kind of thing.
Right. And then I presume you would, in the Model Y or maybe in the Model 3, start adding driver sensing with infrared.
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that, like, I love George because on the one hand, he'll be real bombastic and say, this is totally wrong. But then at the end of the day, like, he's humble enough to know, you know what? Elon's really smart. He knows what he's doing. I may have a disagreement on why we're doing the thing that we're doing here. But, maybe there is a reason and I just don't understand it. And I think later in that clip, he talks about basically the first thing I would do if I was CEO of Tesla would be to realize that, God, I would suck at running Tesla compared to Elon Musk. And, and then the point that he comes around to is that even like the way that they're building it now doesn't mean that they can't do end-to-end, which we've been talking about. It is a stepping stone to actual success. And so that's what we've seen. And so, like I said, the fact that he said this in 2021 and we're seeing this progression now in 2023, it's just impressive.
Let's watch the final clip here.
Even with their missteps, they have advantages we don't have. Elon is better than me at like marshaling massive amounts of resources. So, I still think, given the fact they're maybe making some wrong decisions, they'll end up winning. And like, it's fine to hype it if you're actually going to win, right? Like, if Elon says, look, we're going to be landing rockets back on Earth in a year and it takes 4, like, he landed a rocket back on Earth and he was working toward it the whole time. I think there's some amount of like, I think when it becomes wrong is if you're not going to meet that deadline. If you're lying.
Yeah, that's brilliantly put. Like,
okay. I love it. Those are great clips.
Yeah.
Well done. Well chosen.
Yeah. So that was just what we were talking about before. Like, he knows that Elon knows what he's doing. He knows, like, he has a lot of respect for the team at Tesla Autopilot and Full Self-Driving. And, if he had the resources that Elon has, he may end up taking, end up being a similar approach that he would have to take. So, because you have to, as you apply more and more compute to the problem, you have to know exactly how to apply that. And, that's one of the reasons that Tesla went about it the way that they did.
Okay. I mean, I'm trying to understand as well. The big concern that people have is that this is something that's replicable. You can just go ahead and copy it. I will, while we're talking here, I will go ahead and share this kind of, oops, I'm losing my thing here. And so what you've explained to me is that, no, in order to do even this end-to-end, you needed massive compute. You needed to have massive video. You needed to do all the labeling in the past in order to be able to even start this end-to-end. Comma.ai, they progress, but then they hit a roadblock because they don't have the compute. And then he started this new company. He split off from Comma.ai, correct? And he started this new company called Tiny Corporation. in order to kind of work on that training the machine level model in the cloud, because I think they knew that if they didn't have that, they can't do it, right? That's what's happening.
Yeah, TinyCorp is essentially Comma.ai's version of Dojo. And because they're trying to run a much smaller, much lighter operation than Tesla, then, they're also much less ambitious machines, but something that I think is aimed at being very, very cost effective, because that's, really the resource limitation that they're facing. They can't go to NVIDIA this year and spend $2 billion on H100s. Definitely can't do that next year either. And so, yeah, they've just got a different set of resource constraints. And that's what my understanding is of what TinyCorp is aimed at.
Okay. Now tell me a little bit about, you changed your mind about version 12. Once you saw version 12, once you saw Elon be able to do this, in the last video you and I did, we took apart and we dove deep into Ashok Elaswami's presentation at the CVRP event that happened in June. And he said, when he was asked the question, when's this new technology, which is version 12, going to be in customers' hands? And he paused for a while, but then he did say something like, it should be by the end of this year, maybe by the end of this year. And then you kind of said, no, I don't think so. But then you said, okay, tell me what you think.
Yeah, I was very doubtful. There's still a corner of skepticism. I think that, that probably is Elon time as far as a little bit of optimism to get it out. But the performance of V12, at least in Palo Alto, obviously they've got the most training data for that area of the country, was very, very, very impressive. I did not expect, and this is, I think a comment that many people have made, that for an alpha version of software, that it did incredibly well. And it could very well be, between the maturity of V12 alpha and the amount of compute that they have, and the fact that, it's still August and we've got several months of the year left for them to be able to crunch through this. In a conversation with James Douma, he was expecting like a full training run on V12 to potentially take several months worth of their training time. But yeah, if they do that, they could end up having something that is actually ready to be in customers' hands by the end of the year. Whereas before I would have put the probability at maybe 10 to 15%. I think right now it's actually a solid 50-50, if not better.
But you have to increase those odds. Number one, because if it's end to end, this is truly AI, almost 100% AI coded. This is where the exponential curve happens, and we're still at the slow part. And two, how many times? 4 different engineers from Tesla's AI team said that we're compute constrained at this point. And so now that they've just launched the new 10,000 H100 NVIDIA supercluster on top of the A100 supercluster computer that they already have.
And they're doing training on Dojo. Yep.
All of those are live, and they're just continuing to keep adding. It took a long time, he said, for the H100 to be up and running. It's now up and running. So with the kind of like the two things that are important have happened at the same time, this version 12 looks like it's working, and they're very confident about it, and it's learning on its own. So people, when I watched that,
I was just going to say to expand on your point a little bit, the version 12 that Elon has been so excited about was really trained on their compute cluster before this massive increase. And so, their ability to increase those training runs is going to be, extremely sped up from what it was even to develop his version. And if his version is working great, yeah, I mean, it looks like it could be. And one of the things that I speculate is that once Chat or OpenAI trained GPT-3, then they haven't gone back. They did, for GPT-4, it took them basically a year to actually retrain a base model. But so I expect something similar to kind of be the case for full self-driving, that they'll do one huge training run that gets the foundation model of the driver world model system working pretty well. And and then they'll do little tiny training runs that are basically just fine tuning the model, like adjusting only specific portions of the weights here and there. And those will be runs that can be done very quickly. And if they pass all the QA testing and they actually increase performance, then those can each be released as a point release. And those can come just like back to back to back to back to back. We could see potentially multiple software releases within a matter of weeks, instead of having to wait long
Mr.
periods
Conservative.
of time. So
no more conservative.
Yeah, once V12 ships to, I think it'll ship to customer cars with hardware 3 first. I think hardware 4 will be behind. Like we do see the FSD beta is now on hardware 4 cars, which is excellent news. I don't think that the hardware 4 cars are going to get V12 at the same time that hardware 3 cars are. But once we see hardware 3 cars with V12 in them, I think the pace of software updates for those hardware 3 vehicles is just going to go through the roof.
Right. You made a comment about hardware 3. This is on hardware 3, not even hardware 4.
Mm-hmm.
So everything's going to get improved. And he said that the reason why is because hardware 4 has got better cameras, different photons. They need to retrain everything on those new vision because it's all different. Tell me about your comment about going from just this idea that you can just pick a point in the map and it'll figure out how to get there. You don't even need to have the map data, which is like shocking to everybody because that's like the other competitors. They're all based on high definition maps, and then they guide themselves based on those maps.
Yeah, so when you break that down and think about it, the Waymo, the Cruise, even version 11 of full self-driving, it would not be able to, like, you could say, okay, I want you to go to this random GPS coordinate, and it would have no idea how to plan a path from where it is to that location without knowing what the world in between here and there looks like, so that it can figure out all of the navigation steps that it needs to go. For version 12 to be able to do that without map data, and Elon made the comment that it'll take wrong turns, it's gonna like wander around, but eventually it'll get there. That implies a level of implicit intelligence within the world model of version 12 that really is approximating some, basically a breakthrough in artificial general intelligence. That is not necessarily full realization of artificial intelligence, but that is an intelligent agent that can be given a goal with no other accompanying information about how to accomplish it, and it can navigate an infinitely complex, changing environment around it in order to accomplish that goal. I mean, that is intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. And then each car, that once one car figured it out, then they'll feed the other cars. It's like all these are bots, right? This is amazing. I'm very excited. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. You know so much about this, and I appreciate you going in the deep here, sharing those great clips just a couple of years ago from George Hotz, and then explaining to us a little bit more how what Tesla's doing is right on path. There wasn't this, oh, we were wrong all the way, and that it's very hard for any other company to copy this, and they're about to solve it soon. So this is very, very exciting. Thank you, Hans. Appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Everybody, follow Hans on Twitter, Hans C. Nelson, and he's also got his own YouTube channel too. You should check him out. He does these interviews as well. Thanks, Hans. Talk to you soon.